They didn't love you. That sentence alone might shake something inside you. Not because it's shocking, but because deep down, it's something you've always suspected. There was always something off. Something that didn't add up. The way they stared through you, not at you. The way they offered affection like a transaction. The way they only seemed kind when you were compliant. You wanted to believe it was love. You needed it to be love. Because if it wasn't, then what was all that pain for? Here's the truth. It wasn't love, it was control. Wrapped in just enough tenderness to keep you questioning yourself. They didn't love your mind. They shaped it. They didn't love your emotions. They managed them. They didn't love your voice. They taught you to mute it, soften it, reshape it. And when you finally showed a glimpse of your true self, not the edited version they preferred, something subtle changed. The silence got heavier. The gaze colder. The room felt more dangerous. Because the moment you stopped being moldable, you stopped being lovable to them. Not because you were unworthy, but because your autonomy was a threat to their illusion of power. Most people think abuse always looks loud, screaming, violence, chaos. But the most devastating form of abuse doesn't make noise. It whispers, it rewrites, it questions you quietly until you question yourself. That's what control does. That's what manipulation does. And that's what they did, slowly, consistently, ruthlessly. They didn't need to scream at you to dominate you. All they had to do was convince you that who you were wasn't quite right. Too much, too little, too sensitive, too serious, too emotional, too strong. And so you adjusted. Not once, not twice, but hundreds of times. You edited yourself to survive a relationship that required your submission to continue. Because love in their hands was never unconditional. It came with expectations, scripts, emotional contracts you never signed but felt obligated to honor. And every time you tried to break the mold, to speak up, to say no, to question, they made sure you felt the consequence. Not with fists, with withdrawal, with confusion, with guilt, with the kind of silence that only someone emotionally addicted to approval knows how to interpret. Let me ask you something hard. Do you remember the first time you realized your love wasn't enough? Not because you didn't give enough, but because what they wanted was never love. They wanted submission. They wanted obedience. They wanted predictability. And when you broke from that pattern, when you said, "I can't keep living like this," they looked at you like a stranger, or worse, like a threat, because you were no longer controllable. And a person who cannot be controlled cannot be loved by someone who only knows how to dominate. This is the paradox that most victims of emotional abuse never talk about. When you become strong, the love stops. Not because you became hard, but because the illusion you stopped needing, and they only knew how to love you when you were needy. You started thinking for yourself, and they only knew how to love you when your thoughts echoed theirs. You dared to exist in your own skin, and they only knew how to love versions of you they created. So what now? Now comes the grief, not just for them, but for the you that had to disappear in order to be loved. You grieve the years spent muting your opinions, the days spent apologizing for your reactions, the nights you cried yourself to sleep, believing you were the problem. You grieve the woman or man you were becoming before they entered your life. Because somewhere along the way, you stopped growing and started shrinking. Not for love, but for survival. And the most brutal part? You believed that's what love was supposed to feel like. Sacrifice, submission, emotional smallness. But it wasn't love, it was possession. You were never truly seen. You were scanned, assessed, designed. You were the canvas. They were the painter. And when the painting began to look too real, too alive, too vibrant, they painted over you, again and again, until your reflection was no longer yours, until you looked in the mirror and saw someone who didn't even flinch when they were criticized, someone who didn't speak when they were uncomfortable, someone who smiled when they were breaking, because you were taught that being chosen was the highest goal, and if being chosen meant becoming smaller, quieter, easier, you did it, because the opposite was unbearable: rejection, abandonment, loneliness. But let me say this as clearly as possible. Being loved for a version of you that isn't real is not love. It's a performance. And every time you perform for connection, you teach yourself that who you really are isn't worthy of staying. That ends here. You are not too much. You are not too complicated. You are not too intense. You are simply someone who no longer fits into the box they tried to keep you in. They didn't love you. They loved controlling who you were. And now that the control is gone, so are they. That's not a tragedy. That's liberation. You thought that healing would bring you closer to them. You thought that if you worked on yourself, if you communicated better, if you became more stable, more grounded, more emotionally aware, they would meet you there. You thought growth would fix what was broken. But what no one told you is this: healing threatens the person who depended on your brokenness. They didn't fall in love with your strength. They tolerated it at best, avoided it at worst. What they truly connected with was your insecurity, your over-explaining, your over-giving, your fear of being left. That was the part of you they could reach, bend, use. That was the version they knew how to manage. The moment that version started disappearing, their warmth did too. They didn't say it out loud, but their energy shifted. Their words became cold, their support more mechanical, their gaze more distant. And you, caught in the confusion, began to wonder if maybe your healing made you selfish, maybe your new boundaries made you harsh, maybe your silence was becoming a problem. But the truth is simpler: you became inconvenient. Because healing teaches you to say no, to pause before pleasing, to protect your energy, to stop chasing clarity from people who give you confusion on purpose. Healing gives you clarity, and clarity breaks the spell. Before, you used to tolerate their moods, take responsibility for their reactions, explain yourself 10 times just to avoid conflict. Now you no longer participate in the chaos. And that, to them, is betrayal. Not because you hurt them, but because you stopped letting them hurt you. And here's where the manipulation deepens. They begin to redefine your peace as distance. They say you're different, that you've changed, that you used to be more loving. What they mean is you used to be easier to control. You used to doubt yourself more. You used to surrender fast. But now you take your time. You listen to your nervous system. You say less and observe more. And the more you choose yourself, the more they start to fade. They won't always leave quickly. Some stay just close enough to remind you that they're watching. Not because they care, but because they want to know if they still have access. They'll send messages with no real meaning, ask questions they don't care about, offer hollow apologies, not because they regret what they did, but because they regret losing their grip on you. And you, because you're human, because you loved, because you hoped you'll feel the pull. The old pattern will whisper that maybe it's different now. Maybe they've changed. Maybe you're stronger and can handle it. But listen closely. That voice is not your intuition. That's the echo of your trauma, asking to be seen again. The part of you that still thinks your pain needs proof. That maybe if they come back and love you properly this time, everything you went through will finally make sense. But it won't, because it already does. They didn't leave because you were broken. They left because you were healing. They didn't turn cold because you failed. They turned cold because you stopped performing. You stopped apologizing for your feelings. You stopped making excuses for their silence. You stopped needing their presence to feel whole. And that was the shift, the quiet revolution inside you, the one that no one saw coming, but everyone felt. Because when a person stops shrinking to be loved, the people who depended on their smallness feel exposed. Your boundaries held up a mirror. Your growth disturbed their comfort. Your peace interrupted the game. So now, here you are, not in pain but in clarity, not begging, but breathing, not waiting for their validation, but learning to trust your own. And still the loneliness stings, because nobody warns you that healing will cost you the people who benefited from your pain. But it will, and that cost is real. You'll walk through days where you miss the chaos, not because it was love but because it was familiar. You'll miss the routine of fixing, the addiction to being needed, the illusion of emotional closeness built on your self-betrayal. But that nostalgia is not a reason to return. It's a reason to go deeper into yourself. Because the you who stays rooted, even when it hurts, is the you who never abandons themselves again. They didn't love you. They loved controlling who you were. And now that you're no longer playing the role, the mask has fallen. The silence you once feared is now your peace. The absence you once called rejection is now protection. And the life you thought you lost is finally beginning. You kept asking yourself the same question over and over. If they didn't love me, then why did they stay? Why did they say those words? Why did they hold me? Why did they promise forever? And the answer hurts more than silence. They stayed because you were useful, not to their soul, but to their sense of control. You were a mirror, reflecting back everything they wanted to see, a version of themselves, adored, forgiven, validated. You were not chosen because of who you were chosen because of what you gave, and the moment you stopped giving endlessly, they stopped showing up. Control doesn't always look like violence. Sometimes it looks like affection followed by distance, like love bombing followed by coldness, like deep conversations followed by sudden detachment. That's how they trained your nervous system. Up and down, hot and cold, chaos and calm. They taught you to mistake unpredictability for passion, to associate confusion with chemistry, to believe that your craving was proof of connection. But what you were feeling wasn't love, it was addiction. They kept you in that cycle on purpose, because a grounded version of you wouldn't have stayed. A self-aware version of you would have seen through the inconsistency. But a confused version, a version still trying to earn love through loyalty, that version was perfect for them, because you kept showing up, even when they disappeared, even when they lied, even when they hurt you and denied it. You kept hoping, and that hope, innocent as it felt, was the chain around your neck. So now you've broken it. You've chosen distance over confusion, silence over drama. You've stepped out of the role they scripted for you, and with that decision, something inside you is shifting. You're no longer performing for connection. You're no longer sacrificing your peace to maintain proximity. You're no longer tolerating mixed signals, disguised as depth. You want real, you want steady, you want clarity, and they can't give you that. Not because they don't have the capacity, but because they never had the intention. It's hard to accept that someone can want you without wanting what's best for you, that someone can need your energy, but never protect your heart, that someone can look into your eyes and still lie. But it's true, and your healing depends on accepting that truth, without sugarcoating it. They didn't stay because they loved you. They stayed because your brokenness made them feel whole. And when you began to heal, you were no longer their reflection. You were a reminder of everything they refused to face in themselves. And so they pulled back, slowly, strategically, making you feel like you were the one changing, like you were the one who ruined the connection. But you didn't ruin it. You revealed it. You pulled the curtain and saw the mechanism. You stopped chasing and saw the pattern. You stopped explaining and saw the silence for what it was. Not peace, not love, not safety, just avoidance, just control. And now, here you are, sitting with the ache of clarity, feeling the weight of truth, wondering if anyone will ever love the real you, not the version you present, not the role you play, but you, raw, whole, unfiltered. And the answer is yes, but not until you choose her first, not until you stop abandoning yourself to be loved, not until your nervous system believes that peace is not boring, that calm is not a trap, that real love is not supposed to hurt. Because the you who emerges from this, the version who no longer bends to be chosen, is rare, and not everyone will see her, not everyone will hold her, but the ones who do, will never ask her to shrink again. They'll see her silence as power, her boundaries as clarity, her solitude as evidence of self-respect, and they will honor that, because only those who are whole will recognize wholeness. They didn't love you, they loved controlling who you were, but you are no longer who you were, and that's the point. You outgrew their version of you, and now you're meeting yourself for the first time. This is the part no one talks about, not in self-help books, not in podcasts, not even in most therapy sessions, the part where healing makes you invisible, where clarity makes you feel cold, where choosing yourself feels like abandonment, not of them, but of the version of you who believed they'd change. You miss her sometimes, the version of you who loved blindly, who forgave quickly, who hoped endlessly, who didn't know yet what it would cost. There's a strange kind of grief that comes with awakening, not because you want to go back, but because you can't, and because part of you wishes you didn't have to learn this lesson the hard way. But you did. You saw through the story. You stopped playing the part. You stopped responding to the script. And in doing so you stepped off the stage. The show ended, not because you didn't love enough, but because you stopped pretending. They didn't love you. They loved the version of you that made them feel powerful. They loved the way you adapted, the way you stayed, the way you doubted yourself. But when you stopped doing those things, when you grew, when you stood up, when you stopped explaining, the dynamic collapsed, because their love was never real. It was rehearsed. Now you know, real love doesn't ask you to vanish. It doesn't punish your boundaries. It doesn't withhold affection when you speak your truth. Real love stands with you, not over you. Real love listens. Real love holds space, not control.
Real love celebrates your voice. It doesn't fear it. So stop wondering what you could have done differently. You weren't too much. You were simply becoming more conscious, more grounded, more self-respecting. And the people who were attached to your confusion could not follow you into your clarity. Let them go. You're not hard to love. You're hard to manipulate. And there's a difference. You're not broken. You're unlearning the belief that love is supposed to hurt. You're not distant. You're discerning. You're not cold. You're calm. And yes, that calm will intimidate the ones who fed off your chaos. That stillness will expose the ones who thrived on your reactivity. That silence will unsettle those who used noise to control you. But keep going. Because your clarity is sacred. Your boundaries are sacred. Your energy is sacred. And from now on, the people in your life must rise to meet you, not pull you down to be understood. They didn't love you. They loved controlling who you were. But you are not who you were, and you will never be that version again. You outgrew the pain. You outgrew the performance. You outgrew the need to be chosen by people who never saw you. Now it's your turn to choose yourself, to walk in silence, to be the kind of presence that no longer asks for permission to exist. You are not theirs anymore. You are yours, and that changes everything.